was fishing with his daddy. It's one of my favorite pictures. I think Grandma got that one, if I remember right. I believe Grandma was the one who captured this. This is a picture of Zach with his cousin Jade, and they're fishing in Montrose. And I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the little guy named Zach. In third grade, his teacher's name was Mr. Willis, and Mr. Willis said, "I don't ever remember any third grader writing the way Zach does." Not only does he actually write paragraphs, but they actually have thesis statements. He said, he's a natural writer. I haven't had a third grader like this. And so he took it. Oliver, you're a writer. You will appreciate this. Took his third grade Thanksgiving project to Mr. Arndt, the principal. And Mr. Arndt has children at home. And he decided he wanted to take it home and read it for a bedtime story for his kids. And Mr. Arndt said, "I've never known a third grader that actually wrote in chapters. He has headings and titles for his chapters." In the 8th grade, Mrs. Harrington said at the teachers' conference that Zach was the model student. She said, he's an honor roll student. He's always on task. She said, I never have to worry about him doing the wrong thing. Anytime he finishes his assignment, then immediately he does exactly what I've instructed. If it is to go and read a book or to free draw or do homework from another class. And she said, I wish I could say that about all my students, but I can't. But I can say that about Zach. And then, of course, in high school, he was a basketball standout. I'm not sure on the pictures. Yeah, there we go. That was Zach at Yonker High School. He man 3 years as a varsity starter. Still holds the scoring record for Yonker High School. 3-point sharpshooter, Steph Curry range. I'm not kidding. The kid can just flat hoop. In fact, he's had comments out of the prison because that's one of the things they get to do is play basketball. And even from the tower, the guard will yell, "Man, you can play ball." He's still got it. His game now is kind of having to adjust because he has to take into effect the wind, sort of like when you play golf. Zach was our worship leader here at BFA. You guys know this. Some of you don't. Some of you are just meeting him tonight. But Zach and Nick, both of them have skills just like crazy. Play any instrument they get their hands on. They can sing. And he was truly just an amazing worship leader. And I don't say this just because I'm his dad, but I really sensed when he would play and sing, there was something special. There still is something very special that happens. And it is great to have Jessica and Tony here. And I remember Jessica singing a song and Zach playing when she was attending youth group here. That was probably a decade ago now. I mean, it seems like forever, but it's just, yeah, he's really gifted. So if you don't know the story, Zach went to Bible college, planning to go into some kind of ministry. He didn't really have that defined for him. It wasn't that structured. In fact, even as I'm saying that, I'm not sure that maybe I could talk with Stephanie and find out exactly, because my memory sometimes, but I don't know if he ever said, I am definitely going into the ministry, but he went to Bible college. He was on staff at a church in Dallas area with my brother. He was music staff, played guitar for their church, and there, same thing at Grace Community, great church. And he would often field comments from people, and they would say, when you were singing, I just felt something so precious and so anointed. And so when Zach came home from Bible college after his first year, he did not handle some hurts well. handle some pains to his life the right way. And Stephanie and I watched and were so concerned over the summer as he became more distant, and that had never been anything quite like that. Of course, with any teenager, there's times, but he became more distant and withdrawn, and then when it came time for to go back to Bible college, he abruptly announced to us that, no, I'm not going back to Bible college. And actually, I'm going to keep working this job I have, and I'm going to move out and move into an apartment. And for the next 15 months, Zach became a person we didn't recognize. I mean, he dove headfirst into a party lifestyle. Understand, we do not drink alcohol. We do not smoke cigarettes. I mean, if I smoked a cigarette today, it would be my first one. If I tasted the beer, that would be my first one. And that's not everybody's experience, but that's mine. That's just the way I was raised, and I'm very thankful for that. But Zach did a nosedive into experimenting with drugs, alcohol. And it led him to a place where he made horrible choices. And now he can look back at it and say, I was trying to cover up the pain. Then he would not say that. He was just living life. And he loved alcohol, and he especially loved marijuana. And he tells us today, don't let anybody ever tell you that marijuana is not addictive, because it is. Even when he had really hit rock bottom, and he called his mom and me and says, can I come back home because I have no place to go. And we said, of course you can. We love you. We want you home. There are some rules, and he agreed to the rules. And I must say that our son always honored us and always was so kind to us, and very respectful, always very respectful, always very polite. And but what we later found out is that even when he came home, and even though we thought he was not using at all during that stretch, and even though we said the requirement is you go to church every Sunday morning, and he was doing all of that, but he was also finding a way to sneak out every night. And he confessed to us later, I found a way every single day to get marijuana, every day. Finally, it got to a point where he had run out of money. He made choices that he regrets. Just a lot of things that I won't share that are just sort of private family matters. But 2 weeks before his arrest, I had the strangest thing happen. I was out here in the church parking lot, and I can't even remember what task I was doing. Maybe I had gone to get the mail or took some trash. I can't remember, but I was out there under the alcove, and I saw a pickup truck drive by, and I heard beep, beep, and somebody waving, and so I waved. You know how people are going fast. You can't really make out who is that. And in about 5 minutes, our friend Domingo came. Some of you remember Domingo. Hey, if you don't know Domingo, Domingo is awesome. Domingo wears chains with little medals on them celebrating how many years he has been alcohol-free. And he's just the greatest brother. I love Domingo. He's got the 5-year pin, the 8-year pin, the 10-year pin. And awesome. Domingo just, I hadn't seen him in a long time, and he just comes up in the parking lot and rolls down his window, and he says, "Hey, Pastor Keith, that was me that drove by and honked and waved. Oh, I didn't know that was you, Domingo. How are you, brother?" And, we're talking and fellowshipping, and he says, "Yeah, I don't know why I came by. I'm not sure quite what to say other than I was going down the road and the Holy Spirit told me to turn around and go back and talk to Pastor Keith. Oh, I'm glad you did, Domingo. That's so cool. Thank you." And then he says, "Yeah, I don't even know why I'm telling you this, but yeah, I prayed that my son would go to prison." "Really?" "Yeah, I prayed that God would save him by taking him to prison because he wasn't doing good on the outside." And I said, "Well, that's, I'm sort of going, that's interesting information. Thanks, Domingo. Actually, I prayed that my daughter would go to prison too. Because she was really going down the road." And he said, "Do you know God answered my prayers because both of them would be dead, but they were getting out. She's getting out in November and he's getting out on this day. And do you know they're at peace now? They got their life together and God answers prayer. And I don't know why I'm telling you this, Pastor Keith." And I said, "Well, I'm sure there's a reason." And I was sort of going, you know how we do. TMI, dude. I don't need to know all that. But that was just a couple of weeks before the most difficult ordeal of our lives. On April 29th, 2015, in my morning devotions, something happened that has never happened before and hasn't happened since. All of us have experienced those times where we've had the illumination of the Holy Spirit. He will make a Bible verse just come alive to us. It's as if it just leaps off the page. I've had that happen dozens and dozens of times in my lifetime. But never once has it happened as I was studying the Hebrew language. That morning, as I'm just reading my little bit of Hebrew and still, trying to sound it out, make sure I understand all the words, and boy, it was just like the Holy Spirit just breathed upon Deuteronomy 3:22. "Lo tirahum ki Adonai Eloheinu hu hanilcham lachem." Do not fear, for the Lord your God himself will fight your battles. Man, I just received that word. I remember calling people in our church family and saying, "I think God gave me a word for you." See, I didn't realize it was a word for me. I knew different people that were facing things. I called them. I said, "Deuteronomy 3:22, do not fear. The Lord himself, he will fight your battles." And God blessed them. They received it. I could name, I believe there were 5, 6 different people that I called that day to say Deuteronomy 3:22. I had no idea when I had my devotions that morning that the night before, in the late night hours, there had been a murder take place in our town. And on April 29th, God spoke that word to me, and on April 30th, our church was taking the lead in the citywide crusade. Most of you in this room were part of that awesome event. 22 churches coming together, and just out at the fairgrounds, Evangelist David Ford and different ones involved in different parts of the gathering. And that night, our church was taking the lead on ushers and greeters, and a lot of our worship team was on the stage, and that was the night that I was emceeing things. And it was just one of those nights, and you have them from time to time, where as a church family you just sort of go, "Wow, that was great. That was awesome." Zach went with us to church that night, and we just thought, this is, it doesn't get better than this. In terms of ministry, this is like a highlight. This is wonderful. This is awesome. And we're driving home just elated, and we stopped by Sonic to pick up a drink, and Zach didn't want anything. And the truth is, he didn't want anything at the pizza place before church, and that was odd. And then we drove into our driveway at 9:56 p.m. And when we drove in the driveway, always we would stop in the driveway as the garage door opened up because there's shelves up against the wall. So I would stop ahead of that, and the boys would get out of the back seat. And then once they closed the door, then I'd drive on in the garage. But that night, as the garage door was coming up and the light began to shine out, from out of the darkness, at least a dozen, possibly as many as 18 SWAT officers in full bodyguard carrying assault rifles surrounded our car screaming, "Do not move or I'll shoot." Here's my experience. This is my experience. We had the sunroof open, and as I was instinctively, I realized the car was in drive still because I had not pulled up. And I reached down to put it in park and click 3 different weapons right there. "Don't move! Get your hands where we can see them." I have never been so scared in all my life. I remember saying, "I don't know what you want me to do. The car's in drive. Do you want me to put it in park?" And honestly, I don't remember ever putting it in park. I don't know if they reached in and put it in park. Somehow the car got turned off. Somehow it got out of gear and into park. The next thing that I remember was that they had grabbed Nick, because Zach and Nick looked so much alike. And Nick was face first in the gravel, and they had handcuffs on him. And as I'm screaming, what are you doing? Get those off my son. He hasn't done anything wrong. There's some mistake. Above that, I heard Zach saying, "It's me. I'm the one you want. Let my brother go. He's innocent. I'm the one." And that quick, we didn't get to say a goodbye. We didn't get to hug him. He was gone. And in 30 seconds it happened. And we did not get to touch him for 563 days. Wow. Now, I must say, please don't think that we have aught in our heart against police officers doing their job. We love police officers. We love the Buckeye Police. Even after that, we honored the Buckeye Police. When I see them from time to time, I still carry the blue band with the thread through it that represents not crossing the blue line and honoring the code of the blue line. And sometimes in restaurants, I will give our police officers, "Hey, here's something just to say thank you for your service." They're only doing their job. I know that. But I can also tell you that they were jacked up on coffee and hadn't slept for 36 hours, and they were nervous, and they were making me nervous. And it's just such an incredibly difficult situation. Our hearts broke that night. It's now well after midnight, because we stood there in the driveway talking to them, waiting for them to get a court order to be able to go inside and search our property, because they couldn't get in without the search warrant, and they needed to go through every nook and cranny of our home, and that's a very difficult feeling. And anyway, we could have driven over to Grandma and Papa's house. They would, they would welcome us. And honestly, Larry and Dale, or Pete and Sharon, or any of the board members, or any of our staff members, any of them would have said, "Just come right on in. We know that." But it was well after midnight. It's late at night. And actually, I just really wanted to be in the altars. And so we drove from our house to the church, and Stephanie and myself and Nick were just praying and just in the church and just walking and sitting and talking and trying to make sense of what had happened. I remember Nick's comment the next day on Facebook, "When will this nightmare ever end?" And at some point, a little after 2 a.m., probably closer to 2:30 a.m., as I was praying and walking in the altars, the phone rang, and I answered it, and it was Zach, and he said, "Hello, Dad." "Hey, Dad," just like he had thousands of times, and I knew instinctively, this is that one phone call. This is that one they show on TV. And I didn't want to hang up, and I just kept talking and talking, and I said, "Are you under arrest?" "I don't know, they really haven't told me," but I knew he was. And so the only thing I could think to tell him, two things. Number one, son, Deuteronomy 3:22. "Do not fear, for the Lord your God himself will fight your battles." And the other thing I said, "Son, please promise me that you will cry out to God. Promise me you will." And he did. On May 1st, somewhere around 2:45 to 3 a.m., Zach prayed and recommitted his life to Christ. And he has not wavered from that time to this. So I must say how very much our family grieves the loss of life of a young man in our community who was innocent and did not deserve what happened. Let me just try to say as carefully as I can that the media obliterated our son and partnered him with a co-defendant and said things that were not even spoken in interviews. I myself have viewed the interrogation interviews. I myself have watched everything, read every report, looked at the ballistic reports, the toxicology reports, crime scene photos, everything. And Zach's testimony has always been, "I did not have anything to do with planning a murder. I did not know the individual. I knew him by sight recognition, but I barely even knew his name. And I certainly would never participate in that. And I did not know there was any plan to rob him." And I got to tell you, I used to believe that people who were in prison were qualitatively different than people who are not. And I just used to be the guy, I would watch the news and I'd say, "Good, they got him behind the bars. Man, that's right where that guy needs to be. Get him off the streets." And I can tell you from our experience going to the prisons, sometimes that's true. There are some of them in there, I shouldn't say some, many. It's a good thing they are where they are, because that's where they need to be. But I can also tell you that there is a razor's edge difference between some people being on the outside and some people being on the inside. We've heard story after story after story, many, many people. And so we grieve the loss of life, and we grieve what we've been through as a family, but we wouldn't trade it for anything in this world, because I will tell you that God rescued our son through this. Stephanie and I had begun to pray towards the end of that 15-month excursion where Zach had just dove off the deep end. We prayed, "Lord, whatever it takes." And apparently this is what it took. And let me just tell you, that is a very dangerous prayer to pray. But we meant it. We really meant it. "Lord, whatever it takes, rescue our son." Amen. And God has been faithful. So this was his arrest photo, and that's his mugshot. If you were to blow it up and look at it closely, I can see this because I've taken the computer and spread it way back. There's a little tear right there. And on that tear, you know how sometimes water will reflect? There's a little mark of the cross on that tear.
Wow.
Here's what happens when a loved one gets arrested. First off, you realize, man, this system is humongous, and it's huge, it's so big, it's enormous, and the system is very broken. There's a lot of great people in the system trying their very best, but they're piecing things together, and to try to get information, sometimes you can't. And so we knew that Zach was to have his initial appearance downtown the next day, and at first we had been told 11 a.m. But then they said it will be 2 p.m. Now, maybe you didn't know this, but in Maricopa County, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, there are people appearing before a judge for their initial appearance under arrest from, get this, every 3 hours, 2 a.m., 5 a.m., 8 a.m., 11 a.m., 2 p.m., 5 p.m., 8 p.m., 11 p.m., around the clock, 300 a day, every day in Maricopa County. Isn't that mind-boggling? I had no idea. And every part of the experience is designed to be uncomfortable, to let you know that you're not in charge, and if you're a family member, then you're sort of down here. The way it begins is you go to this initial appearance. You're not allowed to be there in person, but you can watch it on video from a room next door, and it's the same thing you see on the evening news. And so when you go into the room, picture this one little room with like 4 rows of chairs that are bolted to the ground, and they're facing one direction, and they've got painful, awkward armrests in between them. And the only TV that, by the way, everybody's in that room to watch the video. That's the only reason they're in there. The video is on that wall. So you sit in this chair and you crane your neck this way. And when you go to ask the grumpy guard, could I go to the bathroom? He says, if you have your driver's license, you can go. And I mean, he's angry because you bothered him. And so it's all designed that way. But I get it. I mean, I understand it. It's part of the way it needs to work. That night, Zach was taken in for intake, and after his initial appearance, and it takes, I think he said he was awake for 32 straight hours, because we went at 2 p.m. and saw 40 people appear, and then they didn't bring Zach up, and then we went and got a coffee and came back at 5 o'clock, and they called 40 people up, and Zach wasn't one of them. He was supposed to be. And he said, well, they kept taking me down and then bringing me back, take me down, bring me back, and it's all sort of, I believe, part of it's part of the system. So finally, when he gets taken in, he goes in with a white man for intake. And now, to the people of color, listen how much you know how much I love. I love blacks, I love Hispanics, I love Asians, I love people. In our house growing up, Zach's favorite friend was a guy named Kyrie. They played basketball together. Kyrie is black, Zach is white. Kyrie was best buddies, spend the night. They loved one another. And same thing for Nick. Nick's favorite friends were Jovan and, help me out, sweetie. His friend is his best man, I'm blanking, Asante. Jovan and Asante, best friends. I come out of my bedroom one morning and there's Jovan sitting at my table. I'm like, what are you doing here? Eating cereal? Okay. So there's not a racist bone in our bodies. But listen, that night when Zach goes into jail, he was planning to just go up into the general population, and the guard says, you can't go in because there's only cells with black. And the guy that's with him is a guy named Dan. And Dan says, well, you know I can't do that. And Zach says, at that moment, the Holy Spirit told him, something said, he didn't know how to use that language yet, but he just said, something told me, you better go with him. So I went with this guy named Dan. As it turns out, and I didn't realize, I guess I had heard, but racism is huge in jails, in prison. It's huge, and it's a different value system. And it turned out to be providential, but here's the deal. Dan was the second most wanted man in Arizona. And our son was in the hole with him for 2 weeks. Now, if you want to have a comfortable night of sleep, just try to dwell on that fact. My son is down in the hole with no windows, no sunlight, and doesn't know where he, in fact, the whole time he was at 4th Avenue Jail, 7 months to the day, he didn't know which way was northeast, southwest, and that's part of the design. No sunshine, nothing like that. But he's down in the hole for 2 weeks with the second most wanted man in Arizona. And when they finally go up into the general population, as they're walking into the cell block, somebody walks up to Zach, and Dan, who was 50, I was 50 at the time, Dan just sort of took him under his wings, the newbie. Dan looks at the guy and says, "Hey, Howard's okay." And months to the day, and then they broke up the pod, and so they sent him to a different floor, and only then did he realize how providential it was that he had been friends with Dan, because when he went to the third floor, immediately the white boss came up to him and said, "I need to see your paperwork right now." And Zach was able to say, "I don't have it. My lawyer wants me to not have it." And that was true. It was by strategy just for that very reason, because if they found out that he had named a killer publicly in the newspaper and in media, then he would be targeted, because he's a snitch, because the value system is that you don't tell on others. It doesn't have to do with truth or right or wrong. It is you don't tell on somebody. If you do, you're a snitch and you break the code. So he left from 4th Avenue Jail, was in Lower Buckeye Jail for 7 months to the day. Again, 7 months to the day from his arrest till he moved, 7 months to the day until his sentencing. There's been really great family sacrifice during this time. I'm going to show you some pictures. These guys were friends with Zach at 4th Avenue. The guy on the left, his name is D.A. And D.A. is getting out in 2020. He is an amazing Christian man. He's the chaplain's assistant at the prison in Winslow. And he has said, "I want to come to your church when we get out." And I'm like, "I wish you would." And I prophesied over D.A. that he would speak to the nations. I don't know what God's going to do with him. The guy on the right is Richie Luzania. Pray for him, because he has been in the 4th Avenue jail for 6 straight years now, and his trial is finally happening this month. He is a wonderful Christian man. He gave his heart to the Lord in jail. And Richie and Zach and D.A. So here's an amazing thing that happened early on. There was this devotion that happened one night, and D.A. was leading devotions that night. And D.A. says to all of them, "We're going to be faithful to our Lord Jesus Christ. We're not going to be like Judas, who betrayed him." And then the funny part of it, he said, "Judas, how do you say that name?" And one of the other guys said, and he was trying to say Iscariot, but what he said was Iscariot. And so D.A. said, "Yeah, thanks, all right, Iscariot, Judas Iscariot, you are not going to be like Judas Iscariot." And all of them, he went around the table and he pointed at them, and Zach said, "I have never heard a more anointed message in my whole life." And he said, "I knew he was saying the name wrong, but it didn't matter. It was powerful." He said, "Don't you be that disciple. Don't you be that disciple that betrays the Lord. Don't you be that disciple." And he worked around the room, and as he's going, he's counting 1, 2, 3. And then when they finally got to the end, they hadn't even thought of it. There were 12 men around that table.
Wow.
I like this picture. That's my son. That's some of the sacrifices that we've had to do were like on Mother's Day, not being able to be with him. But there's Mamie and Steph and Nancy, and that smile. When people see that, they're like, "We've got our Zach back." In fact, on day 7, when he was arrested, we didn't know. We really didn't know what was going on. Finally, on day 7, Stephanie and I were able to have a 20-minute video with him. And we came out to the lobby, and all the family was gathered there. And my brother had flown in from Texas, and he had hoped to see him in a trial, but that didn't happen. Not a trial, an appearance. And Jerry and Mamie were there, and family members were gathered there together. And we told them what had happened, how Zach had prayed, how he's back with the Lord. And I'll never forget Pawpaw said, "We've got Zach back." And that's that smile right there. And then we just got used to seeing videos and talking and just enjoying one another. Sometimes we'd do a screenshot, And that's our son with all the family. And then this one right here always cracks me up. I mean, when I say that, not laughing, I mean, it's hard for me to look at it because this was Christmas Eve. And we were at the Christmas Eve service here at church. I don't know if you can make that out, but that's in the sanctuary. We've got the laptop, and the family is gathered around the altar, and we're taking communion with Zach. And Zach was using leftover dry breadcrumbs from his lunch and a bottle cap with water in it. That was his grape juice.
You go.
And I remember that night I was going to sing to Zach. I was going to sing the song "I'll Be Home for Christmas," and I'm playing and singing. We're all singing it together. I'm looking at the computer and I couldn't get anything done. I just squalled like a baby. But that was a special one. And then this was the day that he had just been sentenced to 18 years in prison. And I took this picture. That's Papa on his knees. That's Grandma right there praying. That's Nancy back there, and that's his brother Nick. Keenan, his Uncle Keenan, came in that day just to be with him. Family members were gathered. Yet what we suffer now is nothing compared to the glory He will reveal to us later. That's one of my favorite pictures. And if you could just know the prayer that has happened, the incredible prayer meetings. Our practice is we would drive the Zachmobile, and I should tell you that story. Listen, the day that this happened, Papa and Grandma bought a new van. The day it happened. And so we made trips to Florence, back and forth. We've made trips to Lewis Prison. We've made trips to Alhambra, downtown, back and forth. And we dubbed it the Zachmobile. But we would go for the hearing in front of the judge, and we'd come back to the van, and we would get in the van, and Papa would say, well, let's just pray. I tried to find it this afternoon. I ran out of time. One of those times, I just hit the record button. And I've got a treasure, Papa praying in the van over his grandson. It is awesome, the way it's touched all of us. I want to tell you something about Mamie. God called her to minister to prisoners. And it happened all because of this story. Zach's ordeal. She regularly goes to the Australia jail and ministers with an organization called Prisoners of Hope. Jim and Carol Carper, wonderful, wonderful ministry in the jails. And just 3 weeks ago, that lady went on a trip to Colombia, South America, and went in the prisons for a week, ministering, doing medical missions, and joining a team. And I remember when she was telling us, I'm going to Colombia, and I remember thinking, okay. Colombia? Are you kidding? The drug cartel capital of the world. But God has changed all of us, and He continues to do it. We enjoyed lots of things through these last several years. Just a couple of things I'll mention here as we get ready to move in another direction. But Zach would, the meals were horrible at 4th Avenue Jail. Sheriff Joe's jail is very rough. And they serve this sort of a gelatin tofu that's cold by the time it gets to you. And it looks like dog food that's jailed over. And I understand that the food has gotten better, and I'm thankful for that. I really am. I am. And though I do think it should be minimal. It should be just nutritious enough to give the guys what they need, but I also think it doesn't have to be dehumanizing. But he would get beans once a week. And so we figured this out, and so we would have beans with Zach. We'd find out what night he was having beans, and we'd cook beans, and the whole family would get together. One night even, Mamie made it so special because she went all over town finding the exact same things that he would have. The same pork rinds, the same cheesy things. I don't even know what you call them. Some of the stuff we're reading, we're like, we never eat this stuff. But anyway, it was a holy meal, because it didn't matter what it was. It mattered that we were doing it together, and just
Amen.
so. Anyways, just some interesting things. He spent exactly 14 months, 7 months in each jail. He was sentenced 14 months later. The whole time you go through the ordeal, there were just sign after sign after sign, significant family events. His pre-trial conference was on January 5th, his uncle's birthday, my brother Mo. His trial that we did not go to was set for January 12th. That is his pawpaw's birthday. He ended up signing a plea bargain, and this is still a matter that's being discussed as a 21-year-old guy being given very little information, and you're being told by lawyers, you better sign this or you'll go away the rest of your life. You'll never see your family again. And you better sign it now. And so he signed. And then, but on March 2nd, the day he signed his plea bargain, well, that was his uncle Andy's birthday. And then he was sentenced on our anniversary on July 1st. Every step along the way, there were just little confirmations that God's saying, I'm in control. Miracles have happened. When he was told, you will never get in protective custody. He was told at Alhambra prison, and he didn't tell us. He didn't even tell us this till it was all over. But he was going there seeking protective custody because he truly would have been in danger if he didn't get it. And so the officer told him, get this, says, you're a small fish in a big pond, and you will not get protective custody. He said, it doesn't matter. We don't care what a lawyer said or what a judge said. Here, we're the ones that are going to make the decision, and I can tell you right now, you're not going to get it. Zach just kept praying and kept praying, and one night he was getting ready for bed, and he, in fact, had already climbed up into his bunk, and he was ready to go to sleep, and the Holy Spirit spoke to him, get down and read the Bible. I want you to read the Bible. And so he goes down and opens his Bible to the place where he had left off reading. Galatians chapter 3, verse 22 ends with a paragraph, ends right there, and then it starts a new section. So he just began reading verse 23. And the words he read were, we were kept, as it were, in protective custody under the law until the faith was revealed. And so he said, in that moment, I knew that I was going to be granted protective custody. The very next morning, the guard comes to the door and says, Howard, you were granted protective custody. And he said, I guess I wasn't very I didn't react very much. And he said, what's wrong? Isn't that what you hoped for? Didn't you want that to happen? And I said to him, oh yeah, it's just that I already knew. And the guard walked off saying, how did he already know? He saw Malachi, and he said, well, which verse? What do I read? If you can show me you want me to read Malachi, then you can show me which verse. And he turned one page, and instantly his eye was drawn to Malachi chapter 7, verse number 9, and he read these words, I will be patient as the Lord punishes me, for I have sinned against him. But after that, he will take up my case and give me justice for all I have suffered from my enemies. The Lord will bring me into the light, and I will see his righteousness. I'm so very glad to see a really dear friend walk in that I won't name, but she is so special to our family, and she was an answer to prayer. And I can't tell you the miracle that happened when I called Lewis Prison one day and let it ring 60 times. I was like, I've got to get through. I've got to know. I've just got to know. And finally, it went routing through to different people. And finally, a voice says, hello. And I said, I'm trying to find out some information about my son. Okay. What is his ADC number? 311604. And he's supposed to be granted, I think it was phase 2. I don't know what it was at that point, but she says, okay, and she punches it in, and then I can hear the computer, and then I hear, Mr. Howard? This is, and I won't say her name, but I had done the funeral for her mom a few years ago. She died on Christmas Day. Special, special family. And I cannot tell you the numbers of times that individual has helped our family. It means so much to us, and it kind of almost has felt as if like God has somebody planted on the inside. I mean, it's just been amazing. And I just thank God for the miracles that He has done. That's Josh Bray. Joshua was Zach's cellmate at 4th Avenue. He got saved. He accepted Christ just before he made bail. We baptized him in water here at Buckeye First Assembly. He did have to go through trial. He did get sentenced. He is in, and he'll be out along about 2019 at the end of the year. This is a guy named Edgar, and Edgar's really something else. He's an awesome guy. Let me just tell you just enough about him so you know his story. He spent 19 years in prison, and he's a guy from East LA, former Mexican mafia. Just to kind of tell you what a bad dude he is, he's got a scar right under here, and he got in a brawl one time, and somebody broke off a part of a pole fencing, the kind with a jagged spear on the top, and they thrust it up into his chin. And he's been shot, and he's had all kinds of problems, but he's a guy that Zach led to the Lord. And just last week we were able to talk to him. He's not in the same unit anymore, but he calls Stephen and me his family, and he calls Jerry and Mamie, Grandma Jamie, Grandma Mamie, and Grandpa Jerry. And he jokes and says, "You better have a room ready when I get out. I'm coming to live at your house." And I kind of remind him, "Well, you know, you've got a wife." And, but anyway, just last week on the phone, he told us, I feel so bad because I treat my wife bad. I yell at her. She came to visit me, and I got angry. Pastor Keith, I read about Paul says in the Bible that we are to lay down our lives for our wives, that husbands love your wife the same way that Christ loved the church. And I'm trying, oh, forgive me, I need to confess to you. And I told him, because he's from a Catholic background, I said, actually, you don't have to confess to me. You can go straight. Aryan supremacy. Guess what happens? Tony and Edgar became cellmates. And guess what? These guys hug one another and love one another and pray for one another. Only Jesus could do that. I mean, you have no idea how huge that is.
That's real.
And now, here's the latest thing. So he got moved to another unit, and he's no longer Edgar's cellmate, and Edgar went another direction. It happens in prison life. But just recently, he came back to the same unit as Zach is in, and he came up to Zach, and he said, here's his words, "I thought you would want to know, I have been clean for the last entire month. I haven't touched drugs." God is working in his life. Now, all of these guys, they're a work in progress. And the next one is, this is an awesome guy. His name is Damon. Damon accepted Jesus just recently. Well, I say recently. It's probably about 3-4 months ago when on a Thursday night, he was talking to Zach through the hole for the television cable. They call it the cable hole. He's in the next cell, and they're talking about the Bible. And he says, "You know what I realized tonight? That I've said I'm a Christian for many years, but I'm not really a Christian." And Zach was able to lead him in prayer that night, and he got saved. Here's the latest news on Damon. He is getting out in October, And just Sunday, we found out he has been approved to go to Teen Challenge. As soon as he gets out,
That's
they have a
awesome.
bed waiting for
Thank
him.
you, Lord.
The next year, he's going through a Christ-centered recovery program. And his approach, though, is he's getting and got some measure of relief. But fast forward a few months to Christmas Day last year, and he was out of his head for 25 straight hours, screaming, hitting himself, beating himself, throwing his head into the wall, writhing around on the floor like a snake, curling up like an infant, bending backwards and contorting his back in ways that people who don't. Schoolhouse is where you must stay. Little catch teller fell tangled and tied. Told to be quiet, he pinned it inside. Kids are to be seen, not to be heard. Little do they know he's a caster of a word. Last to be late to the church house by 9. The Sunday school teachers keep catch on the line. And it's come follow me, Jesus called to his friends. And it's lay down your nets, boys, let's go after men. Up in the morning and down by the shore, young catcher listening to fishermen's lore, crafting their words about how one got away. But a fisher of men started catching that day. La-di-di, la-di-di, oh yeah. La-di-di, la-di-di, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah. Little catch teller, the caster of word. Trolling good news to the sinner and saint, playing with words like an artist would paint. And it's Jesus to multitudes in open air, and it's 5 loaves, 2 fish, and 12 baskets to spare. He said Jonah's big fish and how Nineveh prayed. He said blood in the Nile ruining Pharaoh's fillet. The word caster spinning good news to them all. It was just like the lake when the strikers would boil. La-di-di, la-di-di, oh yeah. La-di-di, la-di-di, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah. And we know in part, and we trust God's heart, for his heart has a reason our reason cannot know. Then for a season his test line was weak. Satan said catch was a catch he would keep. How our hearts broke when they hauled him away. But now the old jailhouse is where he must stay. Oh, catch teller felt tangled and tied. Taking a journal, he pinned it inside. All of us feared that this one got away. One got away. One got away. But the Lord of the seas still had something to say. Parachuted over the enemy wall, tempted to crumble, but he would stand tall. talking with men that the chaplain can't reach. The word Castor says is a new chance to teach. And he caught glimpse of a heavenly light as the glow of the day pierced the darkness of night. Richie found riches in faith, hope, and love. D.A. found advocacy from above. Grape jelly packets replacing the wine. The daily bread rations would suit them just fine. Oh, they're taking communion, a jailhouse surprise.